When schools and homes align, something powerful happens because education was never meant to be outsourced. You know, you can drop your car off for an oil change or your clothes at the dry cleaner, but education is a total joint effort. And biblically, it's the parents who are the primary disciplers called to form their children. So join us for this episode of BaseCamp Live as we explore how we can be even more intentional in our partnership between our schools and our homes.
Mountains. We all face them as we seek to influence the next generation. Get equipped to conquer the challenges, summit the peak, and shape exceptionally thoughtful, compassionate, and flourishing human beings. We call it Ancient Future Education for raising the next generation. Welcome to BaseCamp Live. Now your host, Davies Owens.
Welcome to another episode of BaseCamp Live. Davies Owens, your host, here with you on the journey to raise up the next generation. You know, there is a need, I think, more than ever, just to pause, take a breath, be able to reflect, which is increasingly difficult in a world that is going at a breakneck speed and everything is constantly coming at us. So thank you for making the decision with all of those distractions to listen to this podcast. We do hope it's an encouragement to you. I will continue to just say in celebration that there is no question God is using the work of Christian education all around the world to raise up a generation of students that can really think and engage and know ultimately who they are and who they are in Christ. It's a really important work that you do. If you're listening and you're part of a school startup and you're thinking, I hope this is going to work, we're just getting started, I want a big shout out to you and thank you for your courage. There's so many people that are in the first 1 year, 5 years even of schools, as well as those who've been around, maybe early adopters. And even an early adopter is only about a 40-year-old school in many cases, maybe more. But for the most part, there's a lot happening right now. So I want you to be encouraged and I want you to know that you're not alone out there. And along that line, a big shout out to a couple of folks that are doing great work around the country. Greg Forrest is head of school at Summit Classical Christian School in Issaquah, Washington. Greg, thank you for listening to BaseCamp Live along with your parents, your teachers, and also being a part of the Zipcast community. Also, a special shout out to Matt Beatty. Matt is head of school at Bloomfield Christian School in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Thank you as well for being a part of this great community that we're all a part of. In this episode of BaseCamp Live, we are always grateful for those who have sponsored and helped partner with us to make it possible to put on this episode. In particular, the folks at the Wise Phone, which is a great alternative to a smartphone, and yet it still allows you a lot of the functionality of working with modern tech in ways that we need to do. When we think about partners and sponsors, really Zipcast is part of the BaseCamp Live community. It's my full-time work as founder and CEO of Zipcast, over 100 schools that are a part of this great community. You hear me talk about it all the time. And I just want to say real quickly, if you're a head of school, I want to encourage you to consider Zipcast for your school. In fact, I was talking to a head of school recently who said, you know, what I love about the new platform that you guys created, which we launched last fall, he said, it's just super easy. I can get in there and record, or we can upload and pick content on parenting or classical education that works really well for our families, reinforcing the things that we believe at our school. If you're interested, sign up for a Next Steps call. Just go to zipcast.media. We would love to talk with you about how we have helped partner with schools in general across all of their communication and helping them to amplify engagement and understanding for parents as well as teachers, all of that through the Zipcast platform. Love for you guys to be a part of it. Wisdom and Eloquence is a great resource book by Robert Littlejohn and Chuck Evans. It's designed and rewritten just for parents. Also, the great partners at Life Architects, Tammy Peterson, Life Architects Coaching, helping young folks and of any age really think about vocational discipleship and learning how to understand yourself better to make decisions about colleges and other things that are coming at you in a very speedy and fast world. And of course, our friends at Wilson Hill Academy, a great resource if you're looking for online classical education and supplementing your school as well. And of course, our friends at Wilson Hill Academy, thank you for the great work that you do providing online classical education, which leads me to the great folks at the Herzog Foundation who are partners with BaseCamp Live. And today, I have the privilege of sitting down with Sadie Elliott. Sadie is a great friend. She's a director of the Herzog Foundation Institute. And Sadie's had the privilege of, in her own journey of combining business experiences she's had, her love for education, and her experience in nonprofit management to grow healthy schools. She facilitates transformational learning experiences through the Herzog Institute. And they run trainings on many topics: donor development, marketing, culture building, succession planning, board leadership, and many more, including the one that I have had the privilege of working with Herzog now for almost 3 years. I was working in their spiritual formation training and focusing now on parent engagement 4 to 5 times a year, 2.5 days together with school leaders from around the country. If you're listening, by the way, and you're a school leader, I cannot encourage you enough to look at what they're doing. It's almost too good to be true. It costs you nothing because their amazing foundation covers those expenses and gives you a chance to come together with other leaders and address these really critical elements of running our schools well. So take a look at the Institute. All that to say, this is what Sadie leads, and she has been at the Institute when it began back and launched back in 2021. She has served 8,540 school leaders and educators from more than 1,500 schools, representing more than 375,000 children in K-12 schools across 48 states. Sadie's also on the board of the Providence School of Arts, a small Christian school providing quality Christian education to undeserved communities in East Kansas City. She's also a proud graduate of Northland Christian School and the King's College. And she is, in more ways than she can even count, indebted to the impact that Christian education has had on her life. So she's a true believer, and she's pouring back in to the next generation, which I love about Sadie. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into this interview with Sadie Elliott. Sadie, welcome to BaseCamp Live.
Thanks, Davies. It's so great to be on.
It has been long in the making. Every time I see you, I'm like, Sadie, you've got to be on BaseCamp Live. Folks have got to hear about the amazing work you are doing personally and the great work of Herzog Foundation. I have the joy, of course, of being a coach with Herzog and so intimately involved. And I thought the world needs to hear more about what you're doing. So share a little bit of your story, Sadie, and how you ended up as training director and the great work you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, again, just thanks for having me on. I agree, long overdue, but I'm excited to unpack today a little bit about what the Herzog Foundation Institute is, how we serve schools, and just give some encouragement to communities, parents, and teachers. So, gosh, the Herzog Institute has grown over the past 5 years significantly. The heart behind the Institute from the Herzog Foundation board was simply that before we could really meaningfully solve the supply side of Christian education, meaning just adding more seats, that we really needed to take a deep dive in making sure that our schools are healthy and that they are aligned and that they are sustainable. And so I got here because my background is both nonprofit management as well as business. I wanted to combine the two in my life and bring the best of business to the nonprofit sector, while first and foremost keeping the mission of the institution that we serve clear. And so I'm a graduate of Christian education, and so I believe in the power of Christian education to change a life, to change a family, and I believe Christian education is the last light on in the building of Western civilization.
I love that quote. I quote you all the time on that. I think it's such a...
It's not an original.
I know, but it is worth stating, and it's rather provocative. It's like, wow, that is a big statement, but one that's very true.
Absolutely. Well, it actually comes from a Lebanese theologian, Charles Malik, and he gave a speech to Wheaton College in the 80s. And you can read it online. It's called The Two Tasks, but it's just a beautiful defense of Christian education. And he says, what can the church at its best do with schooling at its worst? What can the family at its best do with schooling at its worst? And it's a really powerful message. I wonder what our country might look like if the church had heeded his words.
Exactly. Well, and that's another, I hear that quote often. I guess you attribute maybe it to Matt Skinner, but just the most, the greatest resource the church has is actually Christian education, which is another maybe a missed opportunity on the part of a lot of churches too. So it's
absolutely,
you have an amazing vantage point. Give folks just a sense of the kind of from the watchtower there at Herzog Foundation. I mean, you're looking out over how many thousands of schools and leaders and parents, and speak to as well just the growth that's happening right now. It's significant.
Absolutely. So from our vantage point, we serve roughly 9,000 educators a year at this rate
Wow.
from just over 2,000 schools across the country. Herzog Foundation is a big tent organization. So to us, that means that we're going to serve any type of Protestant or Catholic Christian school in the United States. And so we get exposure to the best and the worst of K-12 Christian education. And gosh, from our vantage point, I think when we started in 2021 as a foundation, there were a few things that I feared. I feared that when the dust of COVID settled and that mask mandates were no more, that parents might move back to public education because that caused such an influx in that 2020, 2021 timeframe. I feared that demand, like I said, demand for Christian education would dwindle, or that we maybe wouldn't take advantage of the moment that we have. But what we're seeing is quite the opposite. We are seeing that interest in private Christian schooling is up even from COVID. It's up to 36% of families.
Wow.
In public education would prefer private education for their children. We are seeing that school choice is one of the highest sort of bipartisan issues. If you survey the average everyday family, 86% of average everyday Americans believe in school choice. And so we're continuing to see these trends. The foundation has helped over 500 schools start in the last 3 years across 49 different states. So again, COVID, a lot of families were starting micro schools or neighborhood schools or just an alternative to the sort of crisis that they were in. But again, we're seeing that interest sustained in starting more Christian schools and honestly questioning the status quo that school has to look a certain way, that it has to be 5 days a week, or that it has to be sort of a big brick and mortar endeavor. And so we're continuing to see increases in particularly collaborative models. So where you're in school a few days a week and at home a few days a week, a huge increase in interest still in classical education. That's the largest subset of growth that we're seeing. And certainly just obviously parents wanting to be more aware and engaged in their child's education. And so praise God that we can continue to see these trends.
So it's interesting because it seems like in COVID, there were people that were moving towards Christian education kind of out of, they're reacting against something. And now that seems like they're moving positively towards something they want and see differently. What's the draw as you see it right now?
Well, that's a great question. And I'll start by just saying that this is something we work with our school leaders and our educators about as Christian school leaders, but as Christians, we really should be or want to be known for what we're about, not just what we're against, right? You want to be very clear about what we're against, but that's not what's going to draw people in. So we believe, that Christian schooling is about supporting the primacy of the parents and of the church, and we believe that parents, all of this, the data and all of the studies show that parents, especially fathers, are the key indicator of whether a child will adopt the faith of their parents. And so the schools that are really leaning into that, wanting to provide an education that is dignifying to the child, that doesn't, like I said, just force a child into a one-size-fits-all solution. Schools where your child is known by name, where they have an opportunity to not only grow academically, but especially grow spiritually. And we know that as believers, if we're growing spiritually, then we should be growing academically and intellectually and personally and relationally. And so I think parents are just wanting more than what sort of the generic American K-12 education powerhouse, if you will, has to offer. And so we're more and more starting to look at alternatives and question whether or not education is just about a transfer of information. I think at the end of the day, most parents know it's not.
And it seems like in the evolution, if you will, of Christian education, 20, 30 years ago, the stereotype was Christian education is basically the same thing you get down the street, the public school, but they have chapel on Friday and they hire some Christian teachers, and that's Christian education. I mean, how has it evolved to something, as you're alluding to, something far more robust and rich?
I think I think that's always been a mischaracterization of Christian education, in my opinion. With that being said, there of course are the Christian schools really in name only, and those are not necessarily the ones that we are seeing continue a growth trajectory post-COVID. And so I think parents are really looking for something different, and that trickles into, yes, the classroom, but also onto the fields and courts and how a discipline issue gets resolved. And so what we're working with schools is, for so long, we've always talked about biblical worldview and worldview integration, all of these things. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it, Davies. I think if we are looking at the world and saying, okay, how do we integrate truth? How do we integrate God into this? That's the wrong question, because he is the creator of it all. And so we're not integrating anything into it. Rather, we're unveiling truths about God through education. And so I think that's a shift that I'm encouraged by, that even though many of our educators are trained in, ed departments that are not focused on Christian education, to say the least, or come up, we get certified and credentialed in ways that have nothing to do with providing an authentically Christian education. And so I'm seeing more and more schools buck the status quo on credentialing and on certifications, and want an alternative way to sort of re-educate even the adults in our schools that every aspect of school life is formative. And if we truly believe that, then our school is going to look a lot different than, like you said, a school that just has Bible one day a week or chapel.
Yeah, I call that the Jesus sprinkles principle. Let's just basically Christian school equals same books, same everything. We just dump a little happy Jesus sprinkles on top of it all, and it becomes Christian education. So yes, so there's a lot of what I'm hearing is there's absolutely a very strong movement. I don't know when it goes from a movement to a revival, but there is a lot happening right now by way of just rethinking what it means to raise the next generation and to rethink the important role that parents have. I want to take a break and come back and talk a little bit more about what you're seeing as far as sort of the gaps that are sometimes there between our schools and our homes and how we're reinforcing that gap. I will put a plug in for the training that you have brought me in to do with our team, which is amazing. So first of all, just to back up as a step with training, which you alluded to, how many different training offerings does Herzog have right now?
We have a portfolio of 26 different training types.
Which is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, give some examples, because this is mind-blowing. Yeah.
Yes. So from sort of the leadership or administrative level, we have everything from board leadership and donor development, very, organizationally focused, down to teacher trainings, teacher apologetics, reading in the great books.
When I first got involved, probably 3+ years ago, I think we all of those things are absolutely critical, but there was this sort of maybe more obvious challenge of, the people we partner with, our quote customers, if you will, how do we attend to them, especially in a world that's changing so quickly? So the birth of parent engagement as a 2.5-day training was part of the response to that, which is very much an awareness I have seen in the last few years. I'm curious your opinion, and we'll go to a break, but just of schools saying, hey, our jurisdiction is not just the classrooms or the hallways. It's really having a voice into this partnership with our parents, which, to your statistics you were just giving, there's no way to achieve these great goals if we don't have alignment with the home.
That's right. When my parents were deciding on a school for my older brother and I, they were touring the local Christian school, and it's a big investment, right? It's a big investment to decide to put your kids in Christian school. And I love this story because my parents sat down with the principal of the local Christian school, and we're having their interview, and my parents are asking them questions. Why would we, spend this much money on a private education for our children when there are good public schools in the area? And the principal just said, it's not my job to educate your child. And I think that kind of took them by surprise.
What are you talking about?
Well, what are we paying all this money for? It's not your job to educate my child. But his point was that it is absolutely and ultimately the job of the parent to educate their child. And for a parent to invite a school into that is a big responsibility. I'm excited to unpack that more.
I know. I often say, second only to probably your mortgage, as far as in financial investment. But then I see so many families will spend, more time debating the trim package on their next minivan or SUV than they do their child's school. And I think that's starting to shift where wait, this is a really significant decision and it's one that we can't outsource. So on that note, let's take a break and come back because I want to unpack a bit just how do we build better collaborative efforts between our schools and our homes. We'll be right back after the break. Today's episode of BaseCamp Live is brought to you by my friend Chris Casper, who you heard on a recent episode. His invention, the Wise Phone, is a much-needed third way, providing a solution from the dangers of a smartphone on the one hand and the limited capacities of an old-school flip phone on the other. His simple, distraction-free phone design for families who want technology to serve their real lives and give us and our older children a way to do basic essentials like calling or texting or maps without the web browser and the social media and the endless apps that can pull them and us into the addictive time-wasting aspects of a smartphone. I personally have a Wise Phone and I can vouch that it is an excellent solution and an appropriate way to use technology that supports virtue and focus and healthy habits. Check out the link in our show notes and on our BaseCamp Live website partners page where Chris is offering BaseCamp Live listeners a discount.
Hi there, classical Christian parents, students, and teachers. This is Robert Littlejohn, co-author with Charles Evans of Wisdom and Eloquence, a Christian paradigm for classical learning, published by Crossway Books. We want you to know about our new book with well-known family counselor Keith McCurdy, published by Classical Academic Press. The book is titled Wisdom and Eloquence for Parents: How Classical Christian Education Can Transform Your Children, Your Family, and the World. We have written this shorter, parent-focused book specifically as an admissions and parent education resource for schools and families. We are excited to be proud sponsors of Sipcast and BaseCamp Live, and we hope you are enjoying these two great resources for classical learning as much as we are. And we would invite you to visit our website, wisdomandeloquence.org, to explore the various services offered by the authors of Wisdom and Eloquence for Parents, and to let us know how we can best serve you. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
Sadie, we live in a world today where everything is outsource minded. No one changes their own oil in their car. Maybe I do with my son, but we're weird. But most people don't change your own oil. You probably don't do your own dry cleaning. You probably buy a lot of meals already ready-made. And so when it comes to education, it seems fairly understandable that parents would be like, well, I'm paying you, number one. Number two, I don't have time. I got to go work my job to pay for the tuition. So you quote, take care of it and I'll pick them up at 3:00. And we all kind of divide the labor up. What's wrong with that thinking?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say that I understand it. The pressures and expectations and scheduling and all the things just feel never ending some days and overwhelming most days. So I understand that thinking. With that being said, we've mentioned this a couple times now, but the school has not been ordained by God. The Christian school has not been. The church and the family have been. And we're told that, our role and the work that we will one day be accountable for is our children, right? It's how we've raised them. And if we take scripture seriously, then we know that children will become like their teachers. And so with that, that doesn't just mean they're teachers at their school. That also means they're parents. But it absolutely also means they're teachers if you're a family that's choosing to put your children in a Christian school. And so that's probably the most significant decision, one of the most significant decisions that you can make as parents. But once you start paying tuition and once pickup line starts and drop off line, that's not the end. If anything, that's the beginning of your work with that school. And like I said earlier, there are studies. Handing Down the Faith is a book that I would highly recommend that show, yes, adult influences are instrumental in a child's life, but bar none, the impact of parents and how active they are with their child and in their church impacts whether or not children will adopt the faith of parents. And so being involved from start to finish, and I know it sounds like a long time, but those years fly by, don't they?
Yeah, it's a huge blink of eye, and we talk about that a lot, just those fleeting moments and the impact up to age, under age 12 is even more critical. And then you hit 12 to 18 and peers become more influential. So it's really a very small window, to your point. Mm-hmm. So when you look again from your watchtower out at so many, and you're not a Jehovah's Witness, I keep saying that, going, it's not those watchtower people. It's the air traffic control tower at Herzog. You're looking at everybody. How do you think that, or where do you think families maybe need to be encouraged to be more intentional, engaging with their school? Where might they be working against the school, not even realizing that they are?
Well, I was just recently, Davies, at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California, which is just an incredible place. But he has a quote, and I'll probably misquote him, but the heart of the quote basically says that anything good that will come, any sort of revival or any change, it's all going to start at the dinner table. And so I think before we can get into, okay, how can parents be more involved with their school or, be more of a part of a school community, I think we need to take a look first and foremost at the dinner table and the kind of conversations that we're having. Are we having dinner together? And if we are, what kind of conversations are we having? Because that's where our kids are looking, whether they realize it or not, for alignment. Is what is happening with my parents, what is happening with the adults at my school, right? Are they telling me the same thing? Are they telling me something different? And so I think it all starts with whether that's the dinner table, the drive to school, the time in the car, a slow Saturday morning every now and then when you can get it. But I think it starts there with parents being really, really intentional in the conversations that we're having with our kids. And I think that's where it's helpful, of course, to be aware of what's happening. What verses are your children memorizing this week? And let's have a conversation around those at home as well, because that's where it gets sticky in a kid's heart. And so that's where I'd say to start first and foremost.
And at a basic level, is it, it's, I guess the analogy, and I think of sort of, not that I'm a rower, but if you put two people in a canoe or a boat and you're both trying to go across a lake, if you're not in tandem, you're just going to spin in circles. If only one person's doing all the work, it seems like, or worse, one person's paddling backwards and you're trying to paddle forwards. I mean, these are kind of so again, the challenge is that the modern family is so busy, and of course, technology is a big intruder into the lives of families today. Maybe speak to that just a moment. I mean, what cautions would you have there in terms of these other voices that are coming into that time in which child is now returned to their home, but the home is maybe not as ideal as it could be to complement the school?
That is a podcast or two in itself, David.
I know.
If you haven't
come on, Sadie,
already, I hope you can.
We talk about it a lot. I'm just it's the never-ending point to make. Yes.
Right. And you want to be careful with any sort of big challenges or encouragements because we do understand that that there's a lot of pressure on parents these days. But I also wonder what are we doing to make that harder? And I think technology is obviously one of those ways that honestly, we're really eroding a deep internal life. And, where if the TV's always on or iPads are out, or even phones at a certain age, hopefully your kids don't have them too young, but even when they do have them, what are the habits and the rhythms that as a family and boundaries, habits, rhythms, and boundaries, I would say that are being set. And parents, I would ask the same of your school, right? If your school doesn't yet have boundaries around technology, that would be concerning to me. Mm-hmm. There are some great resources out there. Justin Earley would be one I would point to immediately. Have the households, the common rule, but screens and technology are really, in many ways, eroding the intellect of the next generation.
Well, and it's so pervasive, and it seems so normal to have that those techno intrusions in our lives. And you're right, and challenging for many people is that their schools are still very bought into this sort of one-to-one tech solution for everybody, and so it's very hard to untangle from all of that. But it's interesting in the Herzog training over the last 3 years when school leaders attend the training and then they come with a set of questions. I'm starting to hear questions I've not heard before, which is encouraging, along the lines of, we now have families coming in that have kind of pendulum swung completely the other way, where they're almost concerned that we have calculators in the building. You know, they're very much aware that this is not good for our children, and they're seeking Christian education because in many cases it is the antithesis to sort of the modern tech-driven education model. So there's a desire for the analog, I think, right now among young families in a way that hasn't been there, which is encouraging. I don't know if you're seeing it. Yeah.
I am. And what I would say to any educators or school leaders listening is, be careful of being a Me Too school. We talk about this at our marketing training. Well, the public schools down the street have this sport or this program. The public school down the street has one-to-one. So we're going to have it too. Me too.
Right.
And it's not distinctive. And what's worse than it not being distinctive is that it's not anchored in some sort of robust philosophy of education and view of the human person.
Right.
And so that's what I would say to educators and school leaders is that, we have to really understand what it means that our students are made in the image of God. And we have to have a picture of that influences the way in which we interact with them. And so I'm not saying that includes or excludes any specific activity at a school, though obviously it would some. But so often we just adopt things because that's the norm in education.
Yeah.
And I think that's really dangerous. And, we're going to have to account for that one day, right?
It's a great point. And it goes back to the challenge that we all have to face in our own discovery of what is Christian education, that we're so often biased by all of these things that we think are school equals, Friday night stadium light fun equals a yellow bus equals, and it's like, those are not, it's understandable if that's what we grew up with. But I think things have changed so quickly, as you're talking about, that we have to look at this with some genuinely fresh eyes. So on that note, let's take one more break and come back, because I want to leave folks with some just very specific practical encouragement, whether it's how to continue to partner well in your home and what resources are there even for school leaders. So we'll be curious to get your thoughts on that. We'll be right back after this break.
The road to graduation begins early and takes many paths. And without a skilled guide, it can feel overwhelming. The career coaches at Life Architects empower students to discover who God created them to be through our unique vocational discipleship model. You can bring this graduation game changer to your school through one-on-one student coaching, on-campus workshops, or even faculty training. Visit lifearchitectscoaching.com today.
If you're seeking an education that helps your child thrive academically and spiritually, Wilson Hill Academy has spent years developing a model that I want you to know about. In their free guide, you'll see how their thoughtfully sequenced curriculum prepares students for college and how a biblical worldview helps them understand the world around them with clarity, and how their discussion-based classes teach them to think critically, not just what to think. You'll also discover how their teachers equip students to live purposefully for Christ. With accredited live online classes, your child can learn from master teachers anywhere with an internet connection, all within a community that has transformed families like yours. Download their free guide today at wilsonhillacademy.com/guide or in the link in our show notes. Sadie, we've covered a lot of ground, and at core is this exciting reality that we're part of a revival of what God is doing nationally to raise up a generation to be very different from the world around us. And it takes a lot of intentionality. And I love that you have given us the encouragement of seeing the vantage point you have of the growth of Christian education all around the country and even the world. But back to just the life of those who are listening, they're in their individual homes as a parent. Any other words of just encouragement about how do we align the best we can with our schools?
It's great. And we, want to, like we've said, be aware of time commitments and overwhelm that are already on parents. But in addition, just to what I mentioned about being more intentional with conversations with our students, or with our children, especially as it pertains to what they're learning at school. The other thing that I would say is as I've worked with Christian schools across this country, but especially just growing up in a Christian school, is there are few communities better and stronger than that of your local Christian school. I mean, really intentionally getting involved with your school can provide some of the most significant just relationships. You're really doing life together. And you've got kids the same age. You've got, teenagers going through all the hormones. You've got little kids struggling to read maybe, or whatever it might be. There's really, of course, be involved in your local church. But if you could just add in dad ball, if you could just add in moms in prayer, I don't think there will be many ways that you can spend your time like that you're going to get a bigger return on your time, simply because you'll have deeper and deeper community. So those would be the things that I would say.
That's a great word. And so much of it is just, time equals influence, and you're naturally in 5 days a week, or if you're even in a collaborative, you're multiple days a week, but you are in community. To your point, I hear that phrase or that statement often. We were looking to pick a school for our child, and we ended up with a community for our family. And that really is a beautiful thing where we can often say, come and be weird together. Like, we're the weird family that our third grader doesn't have a smartphone. I know that's weird, but we're weird together. So you kind of need that to survive in a world that's pressing you in a totally different direction all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Sadie, in the final few moments, for leaders and educators broadly, there's so much that Herzog Foundation's offering. Share a little bit of those opportunities.
Yes. So I've talked at length about the Herzog Foundation Institute for anyone who works at a school, leads a school, pastor of a church school. Our training events are available to you. We cover the cost as our gift and investment to educators. And so especially, the parent engagement training, Davies, that we've been talking about on this topic, but we have, like we said, 26 to choose from. But the foundation also runs an online publication called The Lion that I would encourage all educators, anyone listening to this, educators, parents, school leaders, just be aware with what's going on in our country, trends in the church, trends in politics, trends in Supreme Court cases. We really cover the gamut on The Lion. And it's really important, I think, for us to understand sort of the cultural soup that we're swimming in. But also to be encouraged. The Lion is intentionally covering some really positive stories about what's happening for Christian organizations in our country as well. And not many news outlets do I know that are covering really encouraging wins for Christian organizations. And so that's readlion.com. I'd really encourage you to check that out as well.
That's great. And it's we'll close by making the comment that I think that is made at every training to those who have arrived. And I think there's especially earlier on, there was a little bit of suspicion, like, okay, wait a minute, I can go to your training and you're not going to charge me for it, and I just have to pay to get there. So Rusty always talks about actually this is a timeshare and we've got some property for you. Like, it's really not. It's really, Stan Herzog had this beautiful vision. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us here on earth, but he left resources and said, just go out there and absolutely help these Christian schools grow and succeed. And therefore that's this, instead of, like many, I'm telling your story, but so often foundations are wonderfully investing in capital buildings and all these things, but you guys, let's invest in people. And so
Yes.
it's remarkable. So on point, folks, where on the website to go to hear about the training resources?
Absolutely. HerzogFoundation.com will have all of the information for anything that we've talked about so far, for startups or for the Lion or for trainings.
Yeah, and I'll end just by mentioning, because you have a whole school box program for schools. You mentioned the number of schools. Was it 500 that you've helped?
Just over 500.
Over 500. And so I know a lot of people listening are saying, gosh, we are in the process of starting or have started, and that's a incredibly heavy lift if you're on your own. And I love that you guys have created an entire track that even has offerings for the different types of schools. So if you're classical, there's even a classical segment you can take and plug into the overall training and resources. So such great work. And I'm so grateful, Sadie, for you and for the vision of Herzog. And I can't wait to see what 5 more years are going to bring at this rate. Yes. It's pretty remarkable. So
Amen. No, I mean, if we really believe what we say, that Christian education is the last light on in the building of Western civilization and the best tool available to the church today, then we're going to put everything we have behind that.
Absolutely. So well, Sadie, thanks for all you're doing. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I look forward to checking back in with you in the future and continue to hear these stories, because they are certainly encouraging. Thank you for all you do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Davies.
Thank you for listening to this episode of BaseCamp Live. Be sure to check out our website, basecamplive.com, for more than 8 years of timeless episodes that you'll find helpful and encouraging, as well as the helpful resources offered on our partners page. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our partners like the Herzog Foundation. See you back next week.